You're entering Corsi Nation.
This is Jerome Corsi, and today it is Wednesday. It's June 4th, 2025. Thank you for joining us. You can find us on X at Corsi Jerome 1, CORSIJEROME 1. And on Substack, it's Jerome Corsi PhD.substack.com. Jerome Corsi PhD.substack.com. And we're doing Substacks almost every day now. Also, CorsiNation.com, which is our current flagship for a daily podcast. We're doing that through the weekdays only, but daily in the weekdays. I want to start out with one of the economic stories. It's a little bit of, I'll put it here for Chris to pick up in the chat. It was a story that was being covered by Liberty Daily. And it's a little bit of a technical story, but what it is that the Treasury is picking up action when the Federal Reserve is really on the sidelines doing nothing. Okay, the Powell seems to be not particularly pro-Trump, and certainly not doing anything to help Trump, not certainly in the way he could. And you're finding that the Secretary of the Treasury, Scott Bessent, is taking action. Now, what's the problem? The problem is we're at $37 trillion in debt, and the clock on the debt is just, we're accumulating debt at a faster pace than ever because Congress has just unleashed spending, and partly it's because of a lot of past decisions. In other words, the non-discretionary part of the budget, the part of the budget that has to be spent. And that includes Social Security, which is really not a giveaway program, and the people do get taxed for Social Security. It's supposed to be your own money returned to you, although Congress constantly is borrowing in the treasuries of the Social Security fund. So when you look inside the Social Security fund, trust fund, all you see is treasury bills, because all the money's gone. Okay, so the treasury bill problem financing this much debt is overwhelming. So the bond market was beginning to collapse. A 30-year treasury bill had a 5% interest payment to it. So, the yields on these things are just increasing and too dramatic. Okay, so the Treasury decided it's going to start buying back a large amount of our own debt. The Treasury can do that. The Treasury does have a big toolkit, which what Bessent is saying. Okay, so this is in lieu of quantitative easing. In other words, under the Democrats, what the Democrats had the Federal Reserve do is just buy our own debt. This whole thing is a scam. We can print our own money. Modern monetary theory, which I think is one of the most dangerous theories been proposed, is yet accurate in that since our currency is a fiat currency, it's not backed by gold or anything else. Full faith and credit of the United States. Well, we've been downgraded twice. We just got downgraded by Moody's a couple of weeks ago. The United States of America is now in downgrade on its credit rating. Why? Because we're paying off the debt with more debt. All we're doing is issuing more treasury bonds, and they're harder to sell because people are realizing they're going to get paid back with more treasury bill financing in a dollar that has less purchasing power. So we're dealing with here the end of the dollar. I mean, I don't think there's any other way you can look at it. And the end of fiat currencies worldwide. Why? Because there's $100 trillion in global debt. $100 trillion. Okay, now this much debt is completely unsustainable. There is no way it's ever going to be repaid. And that's, I think, the problem that we're facing, is to realize that we are in a situation where we've spent ourselves into bankruptcy. And there's no other way to look at it. Now, I want you to look at, I've been looking at this and predicting this now for years, but it's finally happening. So, Chris, if you'll show the book you can get free by just calling Swiss America. You can buy it on Amazon as well, but you can get it on Swiss America. The book is How the Coming Global Crash is going to Create an Historic Gold Rush. And it's happening. Okay, I'm going to look at Europe. Next thing we're going to do is look at Europe and show you what's going on in Europe. It's chaos. All you have to do to get this book is call Swiss America 1-800-519-6268. And I strongly encourage you to do so. 1-800-519-6268. Why? Because you get a self-directed IRA. Self-directed IRA means you can pick your assets that you want in your IRA. And you can pick gold and silver. Gold right now is trading at $3,348 an ounce. When I started talking about this, gold was at $1,800 an ounce. It's almost doubled in price. If you listen to me, if you had $1,000 in the bank or IRA or whatever, and you put it into gold, you would have doubled the amount you put into gold. It would be worth now $2,000. Okay, but you didn't do it. So you missed out on that. Instead, you held on to whatever you held on to. Maybe, treasury bonds, or maybe you put it in the stock market. Well, in all these things, you have realized a dollar with less purchasing power, as opposed to gold, which is increasing its value in relationship to the deterioration of the fiat dollar. It's fairly simple dynamics. Okay, and in a self-directed IRA, you have to have a depository to hold the gold. Swiss America sets one up in Delaware with a Lloyd's of London guarantee, so your gold is there. Okay, and it is tax deferred while it appreciates. Okay, that's the best deal you can do right now. If I've got mutual funds, I can always switch into bonds. Well, the bonds are weak right now, and so you've got a stock market that is it's very, very volatile. And I'm confident the stock market is going to have C days when it's trading solidly under 40,000 in the Dow Jones Industrial Average. I think it's way inflated. Okay, so if you look at Swiss America and you do what we're saying, there's a lot of things on there. You can get this Walking Liberty $50 offer for one-time new customers, first-time buyers. And those coins are about 99.99% silver. It's a loss leader for Swiss America. You can get them virtually at what they're worth in silver. You'll have some silver, which is also going to appreciate. Okay, and it's at a lower price, so its appreciation ought to have a quicker time doubling. But right now, gold is just taking off like crazy, and the gold rush is going on. It's also going to increase. I just wrote a new white paper for Swiss America, which indicates that these new banking regulations under Basel III, which international banking regulations, gold is now going to be a tier 1 asset, which means the banks can hold gold in their assets at the value of the gold. So banks are buying gold because banks are worldwide, including central banks, because they know it's appreciating. They know it's going to continue to appreciate. Okay, so please take this advice. Also, if you like the show, look at our sponsors. Chris will show you the My Vital C. I take it every day. It's carbon 60. It's a remarkable molecule and has, Chris is showing you how to navigate there to go to My Vital C in the top. It has a terrific antioxidant quality, and it revitalizes you, helps you sleep. It gives you more energy. It helps your mind work. My Vital C, I found all those things to be the case myself personally. I take it every day, and I take it in the olive oil formulation. So there's hair products, there's products for your skin, products for cats and dogs, carbon 60, My Vital C for cats and dogs. And we wrote a book here too, which you can get on the website. The book is Live Longer and Better. And again, longevity is something I think is a theme everybody should take into account. I'm 78. In August, I'll be 79 years old. I'm still probably more active than I've ever been, doing more things than I've ever done. And, having gotten through the Mueller investigation, and now I think we are into Trump's administration with real positive signs. that this deep state is in deep retreat, which is where I wanted to stay until it's eliminated. Try my Vital C products. You're going to like them. Okay, once again, write down the number for Swiss America, 1-800-519-6268. Okay, let's go on to what's happening in Europe. By the way, Russia has not yet responded militarily to the drone attack that Zelensky and Ukraine did on the Russian air bases inside Russia, where the Ukrainians destroyed a lot of Russia's bombing force, or bombers, airplane bombers, including some of their strategic nuclear bombers. And yesterday or the day before, Ukraine also blew up another section of this bridge linking into Crimea. Ukraine is doing everything it can to start World War III. Zelensky's now over here with meeting in Congress with Blumenthal and Lindsey Graham, trying to get more money out of the U.S. Congress to fight a war that should never have started in the first place. This war is a provocation by Hillary Clinton and Obama. The Democrats hate Russia since Russia, after the fall of the Berlin Wall, renounced communism. The Democrats are a communist party, and they're quickly becoming a traitorous party. Okay, so if Putin issued a sense of here's how we solve the war conditions, which essentially is that he can keep the territory he's got in Ukraine, which is largely Russian speaking. There's about blowing up the Crimean bridge. Chris is showing you one of the news articles on that. You can see the damage that was done to the bridge. Russia will repair it. Again, all these things that Ukraine are doing are just nuisances to Putin, but they put pressure on Putin to take military action. Now, Putin's been restrained, but I don't know how long he can be restrained. There's a picture of the bridge. You can see there's a long stretch of water to get into, that is critical in Crimea. It's a bridge to Crimea. And Ukraine is using underwater explosives to blow up parts of this bridge. They think they're real clever. They get more munitions, they'll just blow up more stuff. And the Europeans are all gung-ho for war, because they can't solve their own problems. As I look over the European section, and there's several good articles today on Zero Hedge, what I'm finding is that the Europeans are in dire trouble. And again, you won't hear this much in the American press. So you're finding it, for instance, Germany has taken in huge numbers of Syrians, Muslims, etc. And Germany now is going against this AfD party, which they're trying to say is a Nazi party bringing back Hitler. It's just a conservative party. But Germany, like the United Kingdom, has now passed laws where you can't speak. If you're giving information that they don't like, the deep state, they can imprison you. Okay, even for saying, I'm proud to be a German. Well, okay, that might get you into trouble. Okay, you have to go along with the deep state authoritarianism and the globalism that we are all the world, kumbaya. We don't need to have borders. And now that Germany is packed like France and UK with Muslims who have left and refugees from the Middle East wars, you are going to find that these Muslims will not assimilate. And so therefore you've got a culture clash built in where the Muslims are ultimately going to demand Sharia law. They're not going to want to obey the laws of the UK or of France or of Germany. They think that all of the women are whores because they're going around without, headscarves and covered up with their bodies. And so therefore, these Muslim men think, well, we just rape these women because they're whores. They're showing off their bodies. They're tempting us. So let's just rape them. And of course, you can't report that in the European press because you'll be accused of xenophobia. So this AfD party is gaining, though, with the populist groups as populists are beginning to win European elections. And that's, I think, one of the things that is most upsetting to the World Economic Forum totalitarians is that the American people were the first, I think, to catch on and get rid of Biden and Kamala Harris. But when you look at the UK, where the migrants, the immigrants who are mostly Muslim, are getting £1 billion a month in welfare benefits. Okay, that it's doubled, and it will continue to double in half a decade. So every 5 years, it's going to be $2 billion, then it'll be $4 billion. Well, UK is going to spend itself into bankruptcy. And what's it going to get? It's going to get a bunch of Muslims who don't work. And if they don't work, they're just going to try to overthrow the British government. Okay, the Dutch parliament finally said no to the NATO defense plan to increase spending. Now, Trump is going to be encouraging NATO to increase spending. And essentially, the Dutch parliament slapped down a proposal to increase defense spending to 3.5% of gross domestic product. Now, that's key to NATO's capability targets, where NATO is going to rearm, which is insanity. If you think the Europeans can fight a war, you haven't been to Europe. Go to Europe and take a look at France. Go to Paris and see how these riots, which were over a soccer game, no, they weren't over a soccer game. They were the fact that the Muslims in France do not want to be part of the French culture. They don't want the French government. And Macron and the other French are just going to do everything they can to appease them because they think, this, you don't want to speak negatively. Diversity, we've got to have DEI. In Sweden has now introducing a forced mixing housing plan where they're going to say there's an integration strategy to forcibly diversify the country's residential areas, pushing for what party leaders call a socioeconomic mix of Swedes and migrants in housing developments. Well, how's that going to work? It's going to be a disaster. A bunch of Muslims and a bunch of Swedes together in a housing project, and they're not going to get along. Okay, so the new policy essentially scraps the right of asylum seekers to choose their own accommodation, and it bans municipalities from placing new migrant arrivals in already struggling districts. Said they want to relocate them to wealthier areas of the cities in Sweden in an effort to engineer demographic diversity and repay the integration debt. That's how the leftist parties describe it in Sweden. This is utter nonsense. It's just going to destroy Sweden's culture. And there will be, if Europe continues to self-destruct, the European Union is not going to last. That's the only good thing I can think of this is the European Union, like the Democratic Party, is self-destructing. Okay, now if we talk about the self-destruction and we take a look at what's going on in the United States with this big, beautiful bill, I think Musk is right. There's too much spending, and Congress is not going to stop spending. Now, the reason I want the bill passed is it has in it fundamental provisions for redoing our currency. And if we get these, I think we're going to have to go to some new form of dollar. What the BRICS nations are doing is they're moving increasingly towards a gold-backed BRICS currency. And if that occurs, if we go in that direction, you're going to find that other countries are going to follow, and they're going to start backing their currencies with something of real value. Otherwise, the Congress is just going to keep spending. Now, the insanity is why we're paying interest on money that we could just create out of the treasury. So fundamental, this economic restructuring that Trump is going to have to do, he's going to have to get rid of the Federal Reserve, finally. To 1913, when Woodrow Wilson put in this, globalist plan for a central bank, what Alexander Hamilton always wanted. whereas it was resisted by Thomas Jefferson, who did not want the bankers to be controlling society. Thomas Jefferson, I think, was right. We've seen all the bankers do is produce wars. Okay, so it to me is a fundamental equation of follow the money, because you're following the money. The Bidens were paid off by China. Now China wants to grab this port in Chile, which is this Copia Port E. I've been writing about this and talking about it. I've been working with Todd Callender, who has been my co-author and friend. Todd owns a Cotswold Insurance Group in Bermuda, which owns the right to develop this port. It's a deep water port on the Pacific in Chile. And China has an MOU, a memorandum of understanding, to buy it. I've written 2 articles about this in American Thinker, and you're going to hear more about this. We're going to do more to publicize this. I'm working strongly with Todd to make sure that we do not have China get this port. China gets this port, China will have the only deep water port on the Pacific. I'm going to give Chris one of my articles here. You can post it so you can take a look at it. But again, here's one of the articles from American Thinker, and I'll give you the second one here in a second. I've written 2. Okay, and that's one. And I'll give you the first article I wrote here in a second. And it's a deep water port. China is courting Chile and Brazil because there is a plan that China is going to support to do a construction of a bi-oceanic corridor from Brazil on the Atlantic through Paraguay and ending up in Chile at Copia Port E. Okay, and what Copia Port E will do, it's a deep water port, natural deep water port, so it can take these gigantic new cargo ships that China has. Here's the second article. And it cuts the time to get to the Pacific, to the Asian area, because you don't have to go around the Cape in South Africa, and you don't have to go through the Panama Canal. If you're going to get from the Atlantic to the Pacific. So Argentina, which has a breadbasket, could feed China, and China desperately needs the food. Right now, there's 2 mountain passes through the Andes, that low gradient roads that could truck in agricultural products to Copia Port E when it's developed, and China could get the produce it needs to feed starving people. Again, these are critical issues, and critical issues on the geopolitical scene. Because if Trump is saying we need hemispheric security, he's reaching into Greenland, he's reaching into the Arctic, he wants to get Canada to be part of the United States, then why are we not also concerned about the Antarctic? And we should have a U.S. Navy develop Copia Port E, or private companies develop it with government guarantees or government protection. Because if you in the American Thinker there, you have to click to get that ad gone, and then we can show the article a little bit more clearly. But these are 2 very good articles in American Thinker. And I'm saying if Marco Rubio, Secretary of State, doesn't act quickly, we're going to face a situation where China will be, by July, forcing Todd Callender to sell it to China with a MOU. Instead, we need to get a coalition here in the United States of private investment together with the U.S. government. We need to get Rubio's attention and Hegseth's attention, because this port has strategic value. And if China has both the Panama Canal and a bi-oceanic route overland by rail and highway from Brazil on the Atlantic to Copia Port E in Chile on the Pacific, China's going to dominate South American trade and South American military, and will be, again, at a strategic loss. All right, well, today I've got a very, very busy day. I'm going to do a bit of an abbreviated show. So in the end, God always wins. We're following all this very carefully. I'm very pleased that Putin has not yet retaliated and is trying to restrain Russia's reaction, because Zelensky needs to be cut off from the money. If he's cut off from the money, the war will end. Trump just has to say no more funding. Finally, we are getting real action on the voting issue. God's Five Stones, take a look at it. We're going to raise some more money, but I'm seeing action both at the Department of Justice and with DOJ, taking seriously the algorithms we have in the state databases that we found. So there are cases being developed. I think I see motion now that the federal government is going to begin bringing criminal charges in some of these cases. I'm going to be doing more writing about it, and follow me again on American Thinker for the writing, and follow us here at Corsi Nation for the podcast. The end God always wins. God's going to win on these things too. Right? Even if we enter into end days, God's going to, it ends up with God winning. God did not create this place, so Satan wins. Dr. Jerome Corsi, thank you for joining us. We'll be back tomorrow. We're doing shows weekdays on CorsiNation.com. Thank you for joining us. God bless.